you can control the way datums are displayed throughout your project and in specific views. You can also create view-specific overrides to levels and grids. Typically, the MEP team uses the grids in the architectural model. However, there may be times when the grids are cluttered and do not look good in the MEP model. If this is the case, you can create grids in the model and turn off the grids in the architectural model. To create grids, on the Architecture ribbon, in the Datum panel, select Grid. Since the MEP team typically does not create the grids, we can use the Pick Lines tool in the Draw panel to create grids based on the existing grid lines in the architectural model. With the Pick Lines tool active, I'll move into the drawing area and begin selecting grid lines in the architectural model. Realize that Revit automatically numbers the grids, so you will need to modify the grid name after they have been created. I'll click Modify to end the command. Now with grids created in this model, we can turn off the visibility of the grids in the architectural model. To do this, I'll open the Visibility Graphic Overrides by clicking the Edit button in the Properties palette. In the dialog, I'll switch to the Revit tab. Here, click the By Host View button under Display Settings. On the Basics tab, click the Custom Radio button. Then switch to the Annotation Categories tab. In the Annotation Categories drop-down, select Custom. Now we can modify the visibility settings of the individual categories. Scroll down to Grids and deselect the checkbox. Then click OK to close the RVT Link Display Settings dialog and OK to close the Visibility Graphic Overrides dialog. At this point, the grids in the architectural model are turned off, and only the grids in this model are visible, and we can modify the way they display. For example, when grids are very close together at a particular scale, you can add an elbow to relocate the grid bubble. To do this, select the grid you want to modify. With the grid selected, you can see a small symbol, and if you hover the cursor over that symbol, Revit displays an Add Elbow tooltip. If you click the symbol, an elbow is immediately added and the bubble is relocated. There are also blue dot controls. You can use these grips to manually adjust the position of the elbow and the grid bubble. You can also adjust the length of the grid lines using the Open Circular grip. If you only need to adjust one grid line, you must select it and click the padlock icon to remove the constraint. You can also change the extents of a grid line or level in a single view. If you select a grid, notice that by default, Revit indicates that it is using the 3D extents. In other words, the grid is visible whenever the plane of the datum is intersecting perpendicular to our current level. If I click on this grip, it changes to 2D. Now, I can move the end of the grid in this view independent of its 3D extents and unconstrained by the neighboring grids. Notice that a 2D extent, like an elbow, is a view-specific override. If I switch to the Level 2 Plan view, the elbow I previously applied is not visible in this view. The change I made to the 2D extent is also not visible in this view. But the change I made to the 3D extents by increasing the length of all the grid lines is visible. When you have made changes like this and want those changes to be visible in other views, you can quickly apply those changes to other views by using the Propagate Extents tool. To do so, select the grids that have changes you want to be visible in other views. The ribbon changes to the Modify Grids contextual ribbon. In the Datum panel, click the Propagate Extents tool. Revit displays the Propagate Extents dialog. The dialog contains a list of all views in the project that are parallel to the current view. In this case, we see all of the floor plan views. There is also an option to show only views of the same scale as your current view. Select the views to which you want to propagate the extents of the selected datums, and then click OK. Now when I switch to the Level 2 floor plan view, you can see that the changes I made to the grids in the Level 1 view are visible in the Level 2 floor plan view as well. If you want to undo your 2D changes, you can select the grid, right-click, and choose Reset to 3D Extents. This will extend the ends of the grid back to the 3D extent grips and remove any elbows in this view only. Levels also have view-specific graphic controls. For example, I'll open the south elevation view. When I select Level 1, I see a similar elbow control. I can click on the control to add an elbow, and then use the grips to adjust the label and datum symbol position. If I pan over to the left end of the level, notice that Revit indicates that any changes I make to the level will be applied to the 3D extents. If I click to change this to 2D, now any changes I make will only affect this view. Again, I'll switch to the north elevation view and notice that the changes I made to Level 1 in the south elevation do not appear in this view. But again, if I want those changes to be applied to other views, I can switch back to the south elevation view, select Level 1, and then in the Datum panel, click the Propagate Extents tool. Revit displays the Propagate Datum Extents dialog. Notice that this time, the dialog box only lists the north elevation, because that's the only other view parallel to my current view. I'll choose that view and then click OK. Now, when I switch back to the north elevation, the changes I made to the 2D extents of the level in the south elevation also appear in the north elevation. Let's take another look at the 3D extents of levels. In the east elevation view, I'll select the roof level. Then I'll drag the open circular grip on the left so that the level extents extend past the site on the left. Now when I switch to the west elevation view, pay attention to the elevation tags on the right. They now extend to the right past the site, which is opposite of what I did in the east elevation view. Once again, you must first set their extents to 2D, and then change their length. When you adjust the 2D extents, the change only shows in that view. You must repeat this for each view that you wish to override.